Okay, I'm here with the fantastic Emma James from Ninja, and we are going to be talking about what we've just watched, which was the Chancellors' big announcement. We've been waiting for 2 weeks. Emma, give me your first impressions.
Okay, but not quite good enough. What he's given with one hand, he's made sure he's taken away with the other as well. It's going to be hugely helpful for a lot of freelancers, but it's also going to leave quite a few falling through the cracks, I think.
Yeah, it was a strange one, wasn't it? It started well. It felt like this was going to be an unconditional hug for all the freelancers who've been left
Yeah.
behind, but then it started to creak a little bit as you got into it.
It did, and the not very well veiled threat to bring what I assume he means by equitable tax is national insurance, the threat to bring that in line with those on PAYE. We'll need to wait and see what that turns out to be. If he's going to do that, he's also going to need to actually make the benefits equitable as well. For example, things like maternity pay. Obviously, freelancers can only get maternity allowance at the moment, and it's not as good as SMP. So if they're paying the same national insurance and tax, they're going to want the same benefits as well.
Yeah, and I think those cries have been coming for a long time. Everything from
Yeah.
sick pay to maternity pay, and a very strange tact. It felt defensive at times. It felt passive aggressive.
Yeah, it was very aggressive. They clearly have some sort of issue with the self-employed in general, and it's not quite clear what that is. I think they may have looked at some, like for example, TV presenters who are earning quite a lot of money, and have just decided that every single self-employed person is either one of those or on the take in some way. It, yeah, very aggressive, very aggressive.
Yeah, the lead up, they did mention on a couple of occasions that some of the reason for the delay was because these supposed multimillionaires who are freelancing out there, and as all of us must be, are they need to be accounted for. And yeah, very odd, very strange as it
Yeah.
unfolded. But I think, as you said at the top, something we can be pretty happy about that it's landed, and that
Yeah.
finally we've got a bit of support.
Yeah, I think so. So for it's not going to get everyone, but for a lot of people, I think it will be very, very helpful.
Yeah. Okay, let's get into it. So, who can claim and who can't claim?
So the ones who can claim, people who get the majority of their income from self-employment. So if you have a job and you are also self-employed, as long as the majority of your income has come from self-employment, I'm guessing over the last 3 years, I'm not quite sure how they're going to work that out for people who are both. But as long as the majority of income is self-employed, you will be eligible for this. It's only going to apply to people who have submitted a tax return for 1819. So what that means is if your last return covered the 6th of April 2018 through to the 5th of April 2019, the one you submitted back in January, you're eligible. If you've got up to 3 years tax returns, they'll do an average of the 3 years to get the average monthly earnings. If you don't have three, so if you only have one or two, they'll just take the average of that. The people who can't claim are unfortunately anyone who went self-employed this year. So if you went self-employed after the 6th of April 2019, so you haven't yet submitted your tax return because we're still in the tax year, unfortunately, this isn't eligible for those people, and their only option at the moment is universal credit.
Yeah. He touched on this 4 week delay, and again used it as one of the reasons why we're going to be looking at June. Now we'll get to that June question in a
Yeah.
second, but let's touch on the guys who have been given a bit of time to file what I assume is a delayed or late tax return.
Yeah, so if you still haven't filled your tax return for last year, so the one that was due in January, and there are still quite a few people who haven't submitted that return yet. If you haven't, you've got another 4 weeks in which to submit that, and then you'll be eligible for this scheme. What I should have mentioned before as well is that this is the people who are eligible are those with profits of under 50,000 a year. So yeah, so if your profit is over that, and this is when they were talking about the multimillionaires and the TV presenters, as long as your profits are under 50,000, you'll be eligible. But yeah, if you haven't filled out a self-assessment yet, and you should have done back in January, you're quite fortunate. You've got 4 weeks in which to do it.
Okay, let's talk about the practicals. So do we know how people can start claiming?
Yeah, so HMRC are going to proactively contact people. They are going to wait until after that 4 week grace period that I've just mentioned. Once those 4 weeks are over, they will start working their way through people who are under the 50,000, have got an 18-19 tax return, and then they will invite people to apply. At the beginning of the announcement, it sounded almost as though HMRC were just going to contact you, get your bank details, here's 3 months worth of money. And then as he was answering the journalist's question, it became quite clear that there is going to be some sort of application, but HMRC will invite you to apply. And I guess we'll just need to wait and see in the coming weeks what that application is going to look like. I'm going to assume, and this might be a bit naive, but I'm going to assume that that application won't need any figures because they've already got 3 years tax returns. So I'm assuming part of it is going to be, do you actually want this money? Because he did seem to suggest that people should only, well, he said people should only claim if they really needed it.
So more waiting
More
for that.
waiting,
Okay.
more waiting.
How much can they claim?
So it is, this gets a bit complicated. So it's 80% of your average monthly earnings up to £2,500 per month. So what that effectively means is if you have an average annual profit of 37,500, let's just assume that all 3 of your years were exactly the same. And each of those is 37,500, so your average is 37.5. You will then be eligible for the full £2,500 a month. It's 3 months worth of that, so that is 7,500 in total. But he did say that this is a taxable grant. So it's a grant in that you don't have to pay it back, but it's taxable, so you're going to have to pay tax and presumably NI on this. So even if you get the 7.5, what that is actually going to come out after the wash is about 5,500 ish. I don't know whether it will be taxed on payment or whether you'll do this through self-assessment. But yes, if you'll get the top whack if your average annual profit was 37,500.
Okay. Do we know when that money's going to be hitting the bank accounts?
He said that it will be no later than the beginning of June. So obviously that is quite a long time to wait. So on the one hand, it's 3 months lump sum, but on the other, June.
Okay, so you've said June. We've heard it from him directly. It seems to be the key component that people are talking about online. To the question, what are people supposed to do? What are freelancers supposed to do until June? The answer seems to be universal credit.
Yeah, and someone in the briefing did raise the fact that there is, they've had unprecedented amounts of people applying. I think at the moment it's about 500,000 in the last week or so,
Yeah.
and the 5 week wait for the first payment. He did say that it is within the benefits agency's remit to give advance payments, and that can be done immediately. I think there's probably going to be quite a bit of pressure on them to get those advance payments out rather than making people wait the 5 weeks. It is a lot of this is so unclear, but it's unclear what will happen if someone is claiming universal credit now until June and then takes this self-employed income scheme grant. But yeah, I'm assuming more information will come in the next few weeks about that. But yes, certainly, even if you think you're going to be eligible, I would say get an application in for UC now if you're not going to be able to, if you don't have enough income coming in between now and June.
Okay. We have a few questions that I want to rattle through. What happens to the freelancers who are forced to become one-person limited companies, bands, to keep working?
So the short answer is I don't know. The slightly longer answer is it's not clear whether this is going to apply to you. He referred to self-employed income rather than those who need to do a self-assessment, and I think that was probably quite deliberate. So most limited company directors are taking a bit of salary and dividends. It's not quite clear whether dividends are going to class as self-employed income. I would imagine not, which then means at the moment I think the only possible route would be the job retention scheme, which is for 80%, up to 80% of salary. But in order to qualify for that, companies need to furlough their staff. And what that means in practice is that those staff cannot do any work for the company. And it's not clear at the moment if directors can be furloughed, because it would be quite difficult to claim that a single director of a limited company with no other employees, that they are not doing any work at all, because what that would mean is that you can't be actively seeking work. So you can't be marketing, you can't be talking to potential clients. So that we're still waiting clarification on the job retention scheme as to whether directors can be furloughed. If they can, then that's one possible route. And yeah, we'll need clarification in the next couple of weeks about whether this self-employed income scheme, whether that is going to apply to those directors as well. I think at the moment we probably need to assume not.
Okay. Part-time employment and part-time freelance, where do I stand?
So as long as you were self-employed before April last year rather,
Okay.
so you have an 18-19 return and the majority of your income was from the freelance work, you should be eligible. If the majority of your income was from employment, then you won't be.
Okay. A question that I think is going to come up a fair bit is the idea of averaging out over however long they've got. So assuming you've got 2 or 3 years of returns, they can take a look at the figures. A lot of freelancers will typically reinvest any profits that they get back into their company. I mean, it's not uncommon for freelancers, particularly on our platform, to have broken even in the first year. That often is seen as a success. Anything they can do to try and up their average?
I don't think so. So those who are either breaking even or who reported losses, yeah, they're going to be, that's going to negatively affect what how much you're going to be bringing in. When he said average of the 3 years, I've taken that to mean, in fact, I think he did say trading profit. So not income, but the actual profit at the end of it. So yeah, if you've reinvested a lot of that income back into the business in equipment or whatever, it does look like that is going to impact in some cases quite a bit on what you're going to be able to claim.
Okay, so let's wrap it up. Give me your final thoughts. Now you've had 3 minutes to digest.
I think it's really, well, I say really good. I think it's very good for some people. It's going to be really helpful. The key thing for me is that you're going to be entitled to this even whilst you're still working. So and that obviously doesn't apply to people who are employed. They have to be furloughed, so not working. So even if you're still working, so even if I know like you've had 10 jobs drop down to 1 for the next few months, it's still open to you. So you don't have to have lost all of your income coming in. But it's letting a lot of people fall through the cracks. So anyone he went self-employed 1920. The limited company director thing is quite a big one as well. So yeah, I think in summary, pretty good for some, and possibly about as good as we could have hoped for, really. I think in terms of the money, it's pretty decent. I don't like the threat about equitable tax. We'd need more detail on that. And yeah, I would have liked it to have included the 1920 people. I know it's complicated to include those people, but that's a lot of people who aren't going to be eligible for it.
Yeah, Emma,
So good and
fantastic.
bad, really.
Yeah, good and bad. Fantastic as always. Thanks a million.
No problem. Bye.